What's going on, guys? TowerNumberNine here. Jump to Lightspeed. The fourth set of Star Wars Unlimited TCG is now out. It's looking really cool, and I have this video today with 3 things to do and 3 things not to do as we explore this exciting new set. Let's take a look. So, first up, the biggest addition to Jump to Lightspeed is this piloting mechanic. So, this is, at least rules wise, the biggest addition. And the way it works is units with piloting can be played either as ground units or as upgrades. And if they're played as a ground unit, it's just a ground unit. If they're played as an upgrade, you have to play them on a friendly vehicle, and it has to be one that doesn't already have a pilot, generally speaking. And once you've done that, it acts like an upgrade card. And some of the pilots have very similar performance as units or as upgrades. So this Dagger Squadron pilot is 1 for a 2/1 on the ground, or you can play him as a 1 cost upgrade that gives +2/+1 to a vehicle. Others have very different capabilities in their different modes. It's a very exciting mechanic in my opinion because it offers a lot of flexibility and cool plays. It's also just very thematic. There's really a lot that could be said about it. So my first do is think about how pilots can potentially help your deck. Adding piloting offers cool options for a lot of decks. A lot of these piloting upgrades are above the curve. So normally, 2 for +2/+2, like academy training, would be like a relatively basic upgrade. People play upgrades that are just like X cost for +X/+X, often with text that doesn't do anything. So, we've seen Sabine decks playing General's Blade, even though they don't have any Jedi. So it's just 3 for +3/+3. Darksaber sees play largely below that curve as 4 for +4/+3. The text usually doesn't matter. And these pilots are offering you a much better deal. So here we have Boba Fett, Feared Bounty Hunter. He is a 5 cost ground unit. He's a 5/4 shielded. Also, you can play him with piloting for 2. And if you play him as an upgrade, he gives +2/+3, and you may deal 1 damage to a unit when he's played. And if the unit you attach Boba to is a transport, you can deal 2 damage instead. So not only are you getting a better value in terms of stats, you're also getting this relevant upgrade, and you're getting the flexibility of playing him as a ground unit if you don't have a vehicle to play him on, or if the situation demands that, or because the 2 costs are very different, pilots can actually operate in can actually occupy multiple different places on the cost curve of your build. So Boba here can be both something that you play for 2 resources early in the game, or a 5 cost unit that you bring out later in the game, and that flexibility is really cool. There are a lot of new pilots. There are options across multiple aspects. A lot of decks are going to be able to benefit from adding pilots, in my opinion. It's a really interesting new mechanic. Keep in mind that you can pilot ground vehicles as well as space ones. There are also some leaders who are pilots, so those leaders can deploy either as a ground unit or as a space unit. Or I'm sorry, as an upgrade to a vehicle. They can't deploy as a space unit directly. That would be pretty wild. And so yeah, it's a really cool mechanic, and I want to go and look at some of the exciting new cards. So I'm going to look at 3 hero and 3 villainy cards that I think are cool here for pilots. So Luke Skywalker, You Still With Me, can be played on the ground as a 2 cost 3/2, or you can play him on a friendly vehicle without a pilot for 3, and he gives +3/+2. And if this upgrade would be defeated, you may instead move him to the ground arena as a unit and exhaust him. This is really cool because one of the downsides of pilots is upgrade removal is typically more efficient than unit removal in this game. So cards that remove upgrades are often cheaper or just generally easier to pull off than cards that remove units would be. But with Luke, if your opponent removes him, let's say you play Luke on one of your ships, they play Disabling Fangfighter to defeat Luke. Well, you still get some value out of that because you get Luke as a ground unit. Additionally, this counts if the ship he's on is defeated. I believe it counts if the ship he's on is bounced. So generally, Luke is resistant to things that would otherwise be good against pilots. And, even if the opponent removes the ship quickly, you still get some value with that ground unit. I think he's really cool. Han Solo has his moments. This is a legendary card, one of the better legendaries in the set, in my opinion. 5 cost 4/5 ambush when you play him as a ground unit. When you play him as a pilot, he is a 2 cost upgrade that gives +2/+3, and you may immediately attack with the attached unit in the same action, similar to something like Snapshot Reflexes. And if the unit is the Millennium Falcon, it deals its combat damage before the defender. So this is just so good. If there were a card that were just an upgrade that was 2 for +2/+3 and you may immediately attack, I think that card would be considered strong and competitive. Han Solo is that with major upside because of that shoot first ability and because of the flexibility of potentially ambushing him. I guess in exchange, you can only play him as an upgrade on a friendly vehicle that doesn't already have a pilot, so there is some restriction there, but I think he's a very strong card. And then last but not least here for the heroism pilots, we have Chewbacca, Faithful First Mate. This is a really good anti-control card. He has a 5-cost 5/6 on the ground. This unit can't be defeated or returned to hand by enemy card abilities, which makes him resistant against a lot of effects. Also lets you invalidate things like Power of the Dark Side because you can choose Chewie to be the target, and then it doesn't work on him, similar to how Lurking TIE Phantom counters these cards. You can also play him as a pilot for 3, and he gives the vehicle he attaches to +3/+3, and this unit can't be defeated or returned to hand by enemy card abilities. The same effect as something that you can bring out earlier in the game. Maybe you play a small fighter on turn 1, then buff it with Chewie on turn 2, and now that fighter might be a big problem for a control opponent. So I think Chewbacca is really strong. I think overall these pilots look exciting to me, and there's others too that I think are cool. Let's take a look at some of the villain pilots. Wingman Victor 3 Backstabber can be played as a 3-cost 4/3 on the ground. You may also play him as a 1-cost +1/+1 upgrade on a friendly vehicle without a pilot. And if you do that, you get to give an experience token to another unit. So I think this guy fits really well with the new Pilot Vader leader. And one thing that I like about him is that if you're having trouble making stuff stick in space, you can play him as a ground unit. The deck that is running him is probably also running Overwhelming Barrage. And he can be a nice barrage source just as a 4-power ground unit, even if you aren't able to get that pilot situation set up. And if you are able to get the pilot situation set up, the fact that he can buff multiple units is really cool and helps if you're trying to generate one of those swarms of ties, which Vader can do. Next up, we have Iden Versio, Adapt or Die. I think the original Iden from set 1 was a cool card, and her version here as a pilot is a very cool card as well. Iden is a 4-cost 4/3 shielded on the ground, and if you play her as a pilot, she is a 3-cost upgrade that gives +3/+3, and when this upgrade attaches to a unit, give a shield token to that unit. That is just so good. And so people currently play cards that are 3 for +3/+3, no text, essentially. This is 3 for +3/+3 and a shield. That is so good. And even if the opponent has upgrade removal and they play it on Iden immediately, you lose the stats, but the shield is still there. So there is no longer as direct a counter as compared to some of the other pilots. I think she's really cool. And 4 for a 4/3 shielded on the ground is not terrible either. And then last but not least, Darth Vader Scourge of Squadrons, another legendary card in this set. He can be played as a 7/7 for 6 on the ground, or you can spend 3 to bring him out as a pilot, in which case the vehicle that he attaches to gets +3/+3, and on attack you may deal 1 damage to a unit. If a unit is defeated this way, you may deal 1 damage to a unit or base. This is a very, very strong ability in addition to a nice stat boost, and it can really allow him to do some major damage. So that is Darth Vader Scourge of Squadrons. But we were talking about things that you can do with these pilots, but one thing that you should not do, the first of the don'ts for this video, don't play too many pilots and not enough ships. One downside to pilots is that you need vehicle units to pilot. Most of the time, it's also only 1 pilot to a ship. There are a few exceptions, but as a result, you need to be careful to have enough vehicles in your deck to actually have spots for your pilots. So now, this set also introduces X-Wing and TIE Fighter tokens. An X-Wing token is a 2/2 heroism vehicle fighter. A TIE Fighter token is a 1/1 villainy vehicle fighter. And effects that generate these tokens can help you give more spots for pilots. This can also be really important to think about if you have a pilot leader in particular, because for a pilot leader, if you want to flip them as a pilot, you really want to not only have a vehicle out, but have a ready vehicle out so you can immediately attack and get the benefit of that leader's stats on the turn you deploy them. So there needs to be a little bit of thinking ahead in terms of having vehicles available. In a pinch, yes, you can play pilots as units, but that shouldn't really be their primary use. It shouldn't be like the only thing you do with them, because pilots tend not to be the most efficient units out there because they have that flexibility and advantage when they're played as upgrades. They're not like terrible, but often you could get a better thing if you were just always planning to play a unit. So you need to make sure that you have enough vehicles to actually accommodate your pilots if that's the way that you're going. And here are some ways to get extra spots for your pilots. So Millennium Falcon Get Out and Push is a 3-cost 3/4. It is a vehicle that allows you to play or deploy an additional pilot on it, and it gets buffed by 1 power for each pilot that is on it. So that potentially a spot for multiple pilots there, and it scales with them. Red Leader Form Up is a 4-cost 3/4. It costs 1 less to play for each friendly pilot unit and upgrade, so it synergizes with a piloting-based deck. And when a pilot upgrade attaches to this unit, you create an X-Wing token. That's good not only because you just got an X-Wing token, but it's also good because playing a pilot on Red Leader gives you a spot for your next pilot to potentially go. And then Poe Dameron, One Hell of a Pilot, is a 4-cost command heroism unit. He is a 3/3, and when he is played as a unit, you create an X-Wing token, and you can then choose to attach Poe as an upgrade to a friendly vehicle unit without a pilot on it, which could be the X-Wing token you just created, or it could be something else. So he's cool because if you want to play him as a pilot, you can always generate that token and just attach him to it immediately. You can also play him for 2 as a +2/+3 pilot upgrade without generating that token. So there's some nice flexibility there. A lot of different ways to use him. Essentially, you can play him either as a 4-cost, you can play him as a 4-cost 4/5 with the piloting on the token he creates. You can play him as a 3/3 and a 2/2, or you can play him as a 2-cost +2/+3. A lot of flexibility, and the fact that he generates that token when you play him allows you to create an extra spot for a pilot. So then next up, we have some villain options. So the Kijimi Patrollers are a 2-cost 1/1 space unit, and when you play them, they create a TIE Fighter token. So you just created 2 spots for pilots instead of 1. Wingman Victor 2 Mauler Mythal can be played as a 3/2 ground unit, or you can play him as a 1-cost +1/+1 pilot. And when you play him as a 1-cost +1/+1 pilot, he creates a TIE Fighter token, which gives you a spot for your next pilot. Then this TIE Ambush Squadron is a 4-cost 2/3 with Ambush. When played and when defeated, you create a TIE Fighter token. So this is really useful for swarming. Just playing it and swinging with it creates not only itself, but another unit. And if it's then defeated, either in its ambush attack or in another attack, you get another TIE. So once again, these ways of creating tokens help you get more spots for your pilots if you're finding that you have too many pilots and not enough vehicles. Next of the do's and don'ts, do think about ways to deal with upgrades. So these pilot upgrades are very strong. There are a bunch of them out there, and you might want to start thinking about ways to counter. So disabling Fang Fighter is a classic example. 3-cost 3/2. When played, you may defeat an upgrade. Really solid upgrade removal. One of the more straightforward ways to deal with these pilot upgrades, and it can make a lot of sense to run it. Exhaust and bounce can also be a good way to deal with buffed units. If you bounce a upgraded unit to hand, the upgrades are defeated, and if you exhaust it, they lose the value, not only of the unit's base stats, but also the upgrade for that turn. One note, though, is that the leader pilots usually make their vehicle a leader unit. And this means that some removal stops working on that vehicle. So you can no longer waylay the vehicle. You can no longer vanquish the vehicle because those cards say non-leader, and the vehicle is now a leader unit once they have that pilot leader on them, usually. Damage-based removal might also be tough to get through just because they buff up the stats of the unit. But not all units are going to necessarily, or not all decks are necessarily going to be running pilots. So it's not always going to be the case that upgrade removal is really good. But I personally think that this is a good time to be thinking about cards like disabling Fang Fighter, Confiscate, Bamboozle is a good one. Bamboozle actually does defeat pilot leaders. So yeah, do think about ways to deal with upgrades in this set. And then don't rely heavily on expensive upgrades. So if people are running upgrade removal in order to counter these pilots, I think expensive upgrades like Traitorous or the Darksaber are going to be in a pretty bad spot because these cards are already very negative to have defeated by upgrade removal. So like if you play Traitorous and take over an enemy unit and then play a disabling Fang Fighter and defeat their Traitorous, this is such a negative play for you because not only do they get their unit back, they also just developed an additional unit with the disabling Fang Fighter leaving a 3/2 body on the board. And to make matters worse for you, they spent less resources than you did in that exchange. So because upgrade removal can be quite efficient relative to expensive upgrades are, I think, in a pretty bad spot right now. I'm not looking to play Traitorous. I'm not looking to play the Darksaber. It might be better to be going with alternative strategies right now. Cards that confirm multiple experience tend to be safer because most upgrade removal only removes 1 upgrade. In terms of what we're most commonly seeing, disabling Fang Fighter, Confiscate, they just remove 1 upgrade. So if you wanted to upgrade a friendly unit, maybe it would be more efficient to play like a Wing Leader, giving that unit +2/+2. and developing an additional unit rather than playing one big upgrade. Because if the opponent plays upgrade removal on your unit after it's buffed by the wing leader, all they get to take away is one experience, and you still have the other experience and the wing leader on the board. Um, you could also maybe play some tricks here with sideboarding tactics. Maybe you start out with a deck that doesn't have any upgrades, and the opponent thinks, "Oh, this guy's not running pilots. This guy's not running upgrades. I'm safe to sideboard out my upgrade removal." And that's when you sideboard in your dark sabers. Another thing you can do is if you know your opponent is playing upgrade removal, you can play pilot. You can favor playing pilots to the ground arena to get around it. And lastly, one thing you can do is just make them have it. Sometimes you can't get too intimidated by this stuff, and it might be worth playing your upgrades anyway, especially if you have ways to see your opponent's hand and you know they're not sitting on that bamboozle or whatever. But in general, I don't think this is a good time to be relying on expensive upgrades when deck building, just because the rise of pilots and the potential for upgrade removal to counter them, I think puts those expensive upgrades in a bad spot. All right. The last do here, do think about how to answer space. So right now, the space arena is a very happening place. There's a lot of space cards being printed. A lot of the jump to Lightspeed leaders want to go to space as pilots or have things that synergize with space. And as a result, having efficient anti-space counters can be quite important. This matters a lot if you're trying to dominate the space arena yourself. Some of these games have a lot of back and forth in terms of vying for control of the space arena. But it can be worth thinking about cards that are extra good at answering enemy space units. So if you can deny the opposing pilot leader a vehicle and they end up deploying as a ground unit, which they might well not want to do, you can potentially gain an advantage there. Having space sentinel units can help as well, but there are also just a fair few cards that are extra efficient against space units. This shoot down is a new removal piece, 2 to deal 3 damage to a space unit, and if it's defeated that way, you may deal 2 damage to a base. Very, very efficient card against some of those early ships. Here are some other cards you might consider. So You're All Clear Kid is another new removal piece, 2 cost, Vigilance Heroism, defeat an enemy space unit with 3 or less remaining HP. If you do and an opponent controls no space units, you may give an experience token to a unit. The Millennium Falcon, piece of junk. Classic here, 3 cost, 3/4, and enters play ready, which allows it to sweep a lot of the early ships off the board, especially if you're playing the original Han Solo leader, and that is allowing you to get that extra resource on the board and play this on the first turn. And then, of course, the Imperial Interceptor, another classic from Spark of Rebellion, 4 cost, 3/2, and when played, you may deal 3 damage to a space unit. I think some of these kind of dedicated anti-space cards might be pretty strong. I also think that Space Sentinels, Conquered Dawn Interceptors, Bright Hope, stuff like that, those cards might be more relevant too. And now the last of the don'ts here, don't ignore the ground arena. So yes, the focus is on space for this set, but the ground arena still matters. Ignoring the ground arena can put you in a lot of danger. Some decks can be very fast without needing a lot of space pressure. Just a classic ground aggro deck, someone plays an aggro Sabine or like Kylo Ren or something. This can be a big problem for many. If you're doing all this stuff in space and your opponent is going really fast on the ground, you might end up in some trouble. However, there are some cards that space decks can play to try and help out. You might also want some off-arena Sentinel units, and this kind of goes for both styles of deck. So if you have a space-focused deck, having some extra efficient ground Sentinels might be nice. Maybe you have a space-focused deck that also includes, maybe Obi-Wan Kenobi as a larger ground Sentinel, or the Village Protectors, or maybe you have a ground-based deck that throws in the Conquered Dawn Interceptors and Bright Hope. So that's something to consider. And here are some options that help space decks fight against the ground. If you want to build a space-focused deck and you're worried about getting overwhelmed on the ground, Swoop Down, really nice card, allows you to a space unit to attack ground units with a major buff, and also gives it Saboteur. So if it attacks a ground unit, it gets +2 power, and the defender gets -2 power. So this can often be used to pick off even leaders, or otherwise just get a very efficient combat. Air Superiority, this is a new removal card in Jump to Lightspeed. If you control more space units than an opponent, deal 4 damage to a ground unit that opponent controls, and it only costs 2. So very efficiently priced removal if you're going for space and your opponent's got stuff on the ground. And the classic Strafing Gunship from Spark of Rebellion, 4 cost, 3/4, space unit that can attack units in the ground arena, and while it does so, they get debuffed. So those are some options that you might want to consider. if you have a space focused deck that is trying to get some value against the ground arena. So wrapping it all up, Jump to Lightspeed's a really exciting set. At least in my area, enthusiasm is quite high. Personally, I think it's my favorite set since Spark of Rebellion, and I might honestly like it more than Spark of Rebellion. We're gonna have to see what the competitive meta looks like, how things really shake out. Most of this is just like initial reactions to what it's looking like in terms of what the new set's adding and exploring some of these options. Hopefully these tips are going to help you explore. Um, so yeah, it's an exciting set. What leaders are you most excited about? I'd be interested to hear in the comments below. Any other key points to the set that you would like to go over, or that you think I may have missed? I'd be interested to hear it. But yeah, let me know. Let me know your thoughts on this one. I think it is such an exciting set, and I am really interested to see where it ends up going. So, in terms of the three do's and the three don'ts for Jump to Lightspeed, do consider how pilots can fit into your deck. Don't run too many pilots and not enough ships. Do do consider running some ways to deal with upgrades. Don't run real big expensive upgrades. Do think about options for dealing with space, and don't focus too much on space to the exclusion of the ground. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks to you all for watching. We'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content, and I will catch you guys later.